My Uncle's Journal, 1954. Written by a boy named Sir. The following is the last entry in my late uncle's journal. My grandfather had been in possession of it and recently passed away. While we were going through the boxes in his closet at the Riverview Assisted Living Facility, a place known as the Barnyard here in Stark's Mill, I found my late uncle's journal. I never had a chance to meet my uncle. He had died well before I was born. Anyway, here it is. 7th day of June in the year of our Lord, this 1954. The memory of what happened during my stay at the Daygone Inn has grown steadily fuzzier since my departure, for better or worse. I both fear and pray that I am losing my sanity, for when the haze breaks for even a minute, my mind recoils and sends me into a panicked bout of paranoia. Even these 3 days later, and finally being home, I lay sleepless, afraid to turn out my light for what may lurk beyond the shadows of my room. Every creak in the wooden floor from the caretaker as they pass down the hall sends me into a state of anxiousness that I ultimately can't stand to bear. Behind my false smile, my mind is tottering on the edge of absolute insanity. Before I take this unfortunate concoction that sits at the end of my desk, I shall write down all that I can of my grim stay at the Daygone Inn. I had been traveling north for the holidays to my hometown of Stark's Mill, New Hampshire, when I grew drowsy behind the wheel. I pulled over at the only motor lodge I could find, the Daygone Inn. The Daygone Inn, the best motel chain in America, proclaimed the large neon sign on the side of the deserted stretch of road passing through the outskirts of Providence, Rhode Island. A large mermaid figure, breaching the ocean's surface, on display behind the lighted red and green lettering, had a welcoming face. I pulled onto the hard-pan surface of the parking lot and found it empty, aside from a few rusted-out trucks and 2 cars. Turning off my engine, I turned on the overhead light in my car, and I began rummaging through a pile of papers on my passenger seat when my hand fell upon my wallet. I had a fleeting urge to leave, just to make the rest of the 4-hour drive home. My eyes fell upon the clock on the dash, and I saw that it was nearly 3 o'clock in the morning, and I decided it was best to stay the night. As I approached the front door, the wind picked up and blew a hideous howl through the trees, forcing me to draw up the collar of my topcoat. Making my way inside, I found the reception desk empty. A sign stood on the countertop that read, "If no one is here to assist you in 90 seconds, please ring the service bell." After waiting well over the allotted time, I rang the service bell and I heard the shuffle of slippers approach from somewhere behind the desk. A door to my left opened and an older gentleman in pajamas peered at me and put on his glasses. "May I help you?" he asked, making his way slow and deliberately to the desk, grabbing a large folder from the rack to his right. Yes," I said, a tad hesitant. "I would like a room for the night, just making my way up." "How many?" he said, cutting me off rather abruptly. Pardon me?" I asked. "How many in your party?" He pushed his glasses up the bridge of his nose and looked up at me from his ledger. Just me. I responded, making short eye contact, then shuffling through my carry bag for my wallet. "No need for the wallet, sir," the old man said, bringing his attention back to the ledger on the desk. "Just give me your name and you can pay in the morning. The rate is $10.13 for the night. I just need a name." McClary," I told him. "Stephen McClary." "All right, Mr. McClary. Your room is number 8. It's just up the main stairs, 2nd floor. Turn left and it's the 2nd door on the right." He handed me a key with a diamond-shaped tag that had a very faded 8 printed on it. Thank you," I said as I took the key. He said nothing and made his way back towards the door with a steady grip on the edge of the desk. While making my way up the dimly lit stairwell, I felt certain that I was being watched. I approached the 2nd floor hallway and I stood still for a moment, listening. The gusting wind outside began to crescendo, building up to an almost maddening screech. Then it quickly dropped down to nothing more than a mild breeze. Then there was silence. Upon reaching my room, the door opened as I tried to insert my key. I stood in the doorway, peering in. The light from the hall spilled in on the floor in a slant and revealed enough of the wall to show a set of switches. I stepped into the room and flipped the first switch. Nothing. The second switch provided the same results, so I walked into the room, my hand following the wall for guidance. As my eyes adjusted to the darkness, I made out the shape of a lamp on the bedside table. Turning it on cast a sickly yellow glow over the room. I made my way back to the door, closing it quietly and sliding the door chain. I got undressed, sat myself on the bed, and reached to turn off the lamp when I heard a wet, dragging noise. Slip, thud, slip, thud. My hand remained stretched to the neck of the lamp, touching the turn knob, frozen in place. I held my breath and listened. Nothing. Listening closer, an unease settled over my mind as I couldn't hear anything. Not the wind outside, nor the occasional car passing by. It was like listening for a sound after a blanket of snow fell and muffled all noise pollution. Listening still, I stood from the bedside and turned to look at the door, checking that it was still locked. I could hear my heart drumming in my ears as I again held my breath. Shlup, thud. There it was again, closer this time, as if it were making its way down the hall, coming closer to my door. Slip, thud, slip, thud. Outside my door. My mind was screaming, outside my door, outside my door, outside my... Click. The noise was almost thunderous in the quiet, and at first I couldn't place it. That's when it hit me. The lock on the doorknob had just popped into the unlocked position. I couldn't make out the direction on the thumb tab on the knob, but I was certain that that was what I had heard. Standing still, staring at the door, my mind was racing. Just as I attempted to make a step towards the door, I could hear the slide of metal on metal. Then I saw the lock chain on the door drop from its place, and it was now swinging loosely. I stumbled back with fright as the door swung open, revealing nothing. No light, no object. just a black square the shape of the door. I stood still, peering into the darkness, wondering if the hall lights had been turned off after my arrival when the blackness entered my room. It engulfed the walls around it, turning everything to black, seeming to swallow all the light that the bedside table emitted. As it took on more of the room, I stumbled back and fell into the bed, mouth agape and eyes seeming to bulge out of my head. Just as I was about to let out a scream, I saw an eye. It was as large as a dinner plate and seemed to emanate with the same disgusting yellow glow that the dark had absorbed from the room. The gigantic eye was without a pupil, but just as I realized that, it rolled slowly in its socket, exposing a large black circle in the center. Its horrific gaze fixed on me and met my eyes. Just then I saw another eye open, and then another. Before I could even comprehend the horror of what I was seeing, at least half a dozen eyes had opened and rolled in place until finding me. I opened my mouth to scream, but nothing came out. Suddenly, the lamp popped and I found myself in utter darkness, staring deep into the watery eyes of the abomination that stood just inside the door. Just then, the eyes started rolling around in whatever it was that stood before me, and as they did, I could feel, not hear, but feel, a high-pitched mewling in the back of my head. Advancing on me now, I was finally free of whatever paralytic trance I had been in. I yanked the covers from the bed and frantically pulled them over my head as I began shrieking. There was a firm grasp holding on to my shoulder. I fell back and off the bed, the blanket falling off of me. There was a bright light, almost blinding, and I could hear footsteps. I started swinging my arms crazily when both of my wrists were grabbed. "Mr. McClary," a voice was shouting. "Mr. McClary, please, sir." I opened my eyes and I saw the elderly man from the reception desk, still in his pajamas, standing over me, restraining both of my arms. "Mr. McClary, are you all right? Are you having some sort of medical emergency? Should I send for an ambulance?" he asked. I stared, wide-eyed around the room. The lamp was on, the door was open, and a few startled guests stood in the door looking at me. At least, that's what I thought at first. But as I surveyed the supposed guest, I noticed the three of them were dripping with water, and they were eyeless. I once again began shrieking until my entire world swam with blackness. I awoke in the lounge to the receptionist, tapping on my cheeks gently yet fervently. Sitting bolt upright and surveying my surroundings, I saw that we were alone. "Mr. McClary, would you like me to phone an ambulance?" the old receptionist asked, standing up from his crouched position at the side of the chair that I had been put in. "The lines are down due to the wind, but I can see if the bar across the street has a working telephone. I didn't want to leave you alone." No, I said, bringing my hand to my forehead in a daze. No, I think I'll be all right. How did I get here?" "You had some sort of medical emergency, I believe," he replied, looking me over suspiciously. "The couple in the room below you phoned the desk saying that they heard someone falling and then yelling in pain." I turned my head slowly towards the stairwell, almost not wanting to look. Standing at the top were three ghastly things, hair in tangles, eyes missing, and the wet sockets of their eyes gushing pulses of ichor, which was oozing down their bloated faces. I immediately grabbed my belongings and sprinted for the door. "Wait!" the receptionist shouted. "Wait, you haven't paid your bill." Fumbling for my keys, I dashed across the abandoned parking lot, wind gusting around me in screaming howls. I got into my car and drove far and fast away from the Daygone Inn, far and fast away from whatever lurked in the narrow corridors of that vile inn. This all happened 3, maybe 4 days ago. I'm not going to check my writing. This little drink, cyanide it was, is starting to do the trick. Well, that with the few pills that I had knocking around in my travel case. I hope the caretaker who finds my body will do something, anything with this information, just to tear down that wicked inn, to burn it to the ground.